Welcome to, the title of this session keeps changing on me. I guess I'm speaking on Exchange 2000 Development Platform. Basically, how many people were at Andrew's session right before this? Oh my, okay. How many people were not at Andrew's session? Oh, okay, so quite a few of you. Well, thank you for coming to mine. My name is Mindy Martin, and for those of you who were at Andrew's session, I'm going to pretty much be picking up on the same things that he discussed, except I'm not going to be talking about anything marketing-based. I'm going to show you how to actually do the stuff. So, thank you. And as you can tell with that statement in the slide in front of you, I am not Microsoft. I am an independent consultant, and I actually make my money doing the same thing you guys all do. So things have to work for me. Hey, I love Exchange. So a little bit about me. I actually live on Exchange. I love the product. My background is in database development. I've been developing for 8 years or so. And a few years back, I discovered a little product called Outlook and discovered that you could write applications against a mail server. I thought that was the coolest thing. Then Exchange 5.5 came out, and all of a sudden, they were offering events. You could actually code a mail server. I thought that was neat. Then it got better. Now we have Exchange 2000. I've spent the last year of my life working with the Exchange team out in Redmond, helping them tell their developer tale. They've got some great stuff built into this product. And I really hope that after this session and a number of the other sessions this week, you're really excited about going back and building all kinds of solutions against Exchange. It's really the neatest thing. So anyhow, that's a little bit about me. I'm an independent consultant. I love doing this stuff. I've got a book coming out this summer called Programming Collaborative Web Applications with Exchange 2000 Server. So all the stuff you're going to see here today, any programming topics you'll see throughout the week, will be available in this book. That will be out August, I think. And there's my email address also. So if we get done with all this stuff, you go back. And of course, everything seems easy when you're here watching things. But when you go back and try and build it, it doesn't seem to work. Send me an email. I'm happy to help out. Blah, 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 blah. Enough of that. So what are you going to see in this session? Once again, for those of you who saw Andrew's talk, Andrew took a look at all these great new developer features inside of Exchange, and he showed you some wonderful demos that really demonstrated the power behind these features. What I'm going to be doing is I'm not going to work with the same application. I'm going to work with a much simpler application, and I'm going to show you how to actually build these things. And we're going to drill into the details. I'm going to tell you what you need to be aware of when you go back and you want to create these things. So it's going to be a much simpler concept. However, if you don't learn it this way, you're not going to be able to build those really kick-ass applications. So in the next hour and a bit, I'm going to take you for a tour through Exchange development. We'll start with the new tools you'll be using, moving into data architecture, the web storage system, the schema behind it, creating a schema, web storage system forms. I'll show you how to actually get those working so you can replace your default OS screens. Web storage system events, I'll show you what goes into creating those events that Andrew was showing. And we'll talk a little bit about security, and then we'll wrap it up. All of these topics I'll be showing you will be drilled down into hardcore detail later this week as well. So let's start off. Let's jump right in to touring the facilities. The tools you are using to build Exchange 2000 applications have changed. How many people have built an application with Exchange 5.5 and something else? Quite a few. Anybody tried building an app with Exchange 2000 yet? You guys don't count. Not you guys, the Microsoft folks in the back. All right, well, for those of you who are coming from 5.5, you're going to see that the environment is a little different now. And I actually really, really like it over 5.5. In 5.5, you weren't doing a lot as a developer inside of the Exchange administration panel. Now with Exchange 2000, there's lots of stuff that you can do with that console. You don't have to go into Outlook to do things, for example, like create a public folder, or go into Outlook to configure your folder security. You can do that all now using the administrator or the management tool. I'm going to go ahead and fire that up. It's called the System Manager. And as I've always said with 5.5, if you are not the administrator of Exchange at your business, find out who is and make friends. You need that person. So here I am inside of Exchange Administrator, System Manager. And if I was getting ready to build a new application, one of the first things I do personally is come down here and create what's called a new public folder tree. Has anyone been to a session where they've discussed what these public folder trees are? A couple people? Okay, this is so cool. So what was going on in 5.5? You had your mailboxes where you could keep all your personal stuff. Everyone else could as well. If you wanted to build an application, what did you do? You went out and you worked on the public folder tree. You put in a folder inside of there. You built some custom forms. But it was always the public folder tree. Now with Exchange 2000, you're not limited to just those two options. You can now create your own folder tree specific to your application. So for example, I can create an entire folder tree just for my marketing applications or just for my advertising applications. So what you're seeing down here is, for example, there's our public folders tree. It hasn't gone away. This is still the standard thing you see from Outlook, but now you can also create these additional ones. For example, I've got one in here called Applications. And underneath Applications, I've got some folders, but this is where I'm keeping my applications. The nice thing about keeping this separate from your standard public folder tree is that you don't have to worry about, number one, application discovery. For those of you who are working in Fortune 500, 1,000 plus companies, those public folder trees can get enormous. And when you're relying on your users to try and find those applications, they can get really discouraged. By putting it in one single location, one single tree, you're making discovery much easier. You can give the user a URL to this one thing. From an administration point of view, it also makes doing backups and restores much easier. You don't have to shut down all of public folders. You can just shut down this one thing, do what you need to do, and you're back up and running. And those people using public folders, they don't even have to know what happened. So here I am in a folder tree. Okay. And I've got a public folder down here. And this is probably the coolest feature. I just right-clicked. And I've got a shortcut menu. In the old administrator, you couldn't do something like that. Better yet, I can say New Public Folder. I can create it directly inside of here. I don't have to go to Outlook. I can also come in and manage my folders inside of here. So even if I'm on my server or if my mail administrator has given me this console on another client machine, I can come in here and manage my application folders. Do things like handle my folder permissions. Okay. You can see this has changed a little bit. We'll talk about it later, and Andrew will expand upon it as well. These are all my access rights to the folder. You can also do stuff like, let's see. I don't know exactly where it's at. Set up your mail-enabled folders in here as well. All of this can be done right inside of here. Now, one of the other things you're going to be doing, working inside of here, is because Exchange is so web-centric, everything is URL addressable, you're going to end up working with virtual directories. And what's really nice is this stuff is all built in right into the administrator. You don't have to go out into ISM and handle everything through IIS snap-in. Instead, right inside of the Exchange admin, I can come in here and configure for my HTTP protocol various virtual directories to provide access to my different folders inside of my folder trees. Now, these two areas are significant here. If you are building a web front end to an Exchange folder, your virtual directory and that HTTP protocol, HTTP, is what's going to be used to access your data. So for example, here I could go to a browser, say http://whack, name of my server, which is cyber server, and my virtual directory. And that would take me to whatever this virtual directory is mapped to, which happens to be a public folder. Now, if you're going to be writing code for, say, your event syncs and that other stuff, you're actually going to be using your folder tree name and your folder name. So you've got to get used to both of these things. And you'll see in later sessions throughout the week, they'll really expand upon this. Push 5 different buttons to switch the screens. So this is what you're going to be using the Exchange System Manager for. Now, another tool has come into play, Active Directory. The Active Directory comes with Windows 2000. You configure it for a domain. And the Active Directory has taken the responsibility from Exchange for managing mailboxes. It's taken that responsibility, put it right into the Active Directory. So now the Active Directory is managing not only the users in your domain, but also their mailboxes and any of the settings right on those mailboxes. For example, delivery limits, stuff like that. You're going to be going inside of there. When you're writing code, you're going to be accessing the Active Directory for stuff like your server name, your domain name, the currently logged on user, all the names of the people with mailboxes in your organization. Okay, so these are the different tools. Actually, let me show you that Active Directory first. Now, what's really neat is everything inside of here, all these different console panels are actually snap-ins working with MMC. MMC works with Windows 2000. It allows you to take these different management tools and create one single view. It makes it really easy for Exchange development to put a bunch of these things in the same console. For example, I've got my Active Directory here, along with a few others, component services, event viewer, something called ADSI edit, and my Exchange manager. Here's my Active Directory. And for example, here's all the different users on my system. And sure enough, when I open up one, for example, for myself, I can see that, yes, I do have tabs here for Exchange information, my different Exchange features, delivery restrictions, et cetera. All that's done here. And because it's done here programmatically, you'll be accessing this for all that information. And we're back. Okay, so these are the main tools that you're going to be using to set up your application to get started. Notice I haven't talked anything about development yet in the way of those tools. We're going to be getting to that. First thing you need to do is just build that framework. So now that you have an idea of how you're going to be generating these folders, setting the properties, et cetera, let's move into how you're going to be accessing the data inside of there. Now, we talked a little bit about Active Directory, so I'm going to jump right into web storage system. How many people are still a little vague on what the web storage system is? Anybody? Be honest. I was for about 6 months. Of course, they kept changing the name on me, too. That didn't help. The web storage system, simply put, is an information store. Each information store is a web storage system. It's got this new fancy name because it does bring some really cool new concepts to it. But that's essentially all you have to worry about. Okay? So when you hear someone say web storage system, they're talking about an information store. For example, you saw my applications folder tree. That could be referenced as the applications web storage system. It is a single infrastructure for storing all resources. Resource means like an Exchange item, a contact, a Word document, a PowerPoint presentation, a web file, anything you want to put inside of there. And all of that data is accessible to you using a number of different approaches. You can write ADO code to access that. You can use CDO. You can also use XML if you're into that. And it also provides extended features, things like events, workflow, stuff that you've already seen. But what's really cool about the web storage system is something called the schema. The schema is this data definition that's lying underneath every web storage system. And the schema just contains a ton of different properties. But they're all in the same place, which is so cool. There's no more guessing about where these properties live, whether it's with the form or in some folder or if you've published a form somewhere else. All these properties are stored inside of this schema. These properties are then arranged into things called namespaces, and you can expand on this as we're about to see. To give you a better feel for what a schema looks like, let's take a look at this little graphic here. This blob you're seeing right here, pretend that this is a schema. Your schema for a web storage system is comprised of all kinds of different properties. We're going to see things that return your URL to a resource in a folder. For example, get the URL to an item in your inbox. Or you'll have properties, for example, like the author of an item. Those properties are arranged into something called namespaces. Namespaces do basically two things. Number one, they keep all these properties unique so that you can, for example, use a property with the same name in two different locations and have it store two different types of data. A namespace also identifies a property, keeps them clean. Now, a resource inside of a web storage system is going to have properties from all these things. It doesn't necessarily limit itself to one single namespace. You're going to pull properties from a lot of different places. Let me give you an idea of this. By the way, tell me if I never switch these things correctly, and if you're still looking at slides and I'm talking about a demo, somebody please yell out. Thank you. I'm going to open up this little tool here called a content class browser. I just want to give you a feel for how many properties there are out there. I'm going to use a URL here, and I'm just accessing a particular folder called staff. And this thing has inside of it a number of different contact items. And here, we've got the names of these different contact items. That EML extension you're seeing is a standard extension for all Exchange items. So for contacts, mail messages, appointments, tasks, etc. All those will have that .eml. Now, when I take a look at one of these, what you're seeing down in this list box here, scrolling by, and don't worry about reading each one of those, you're seeing all the properties that are associated with this particular item. And it just keeps going on and on and on and on. There are a lot of properties. But you can see that they're from different locations. They don't all have the same name, for example. So in those names that we were seeing in the list box, these are some examples of properties inside the web storage system. Display name, which was that like edendelaney.eml. href, which is a URL to an item. These are two of the biggest properties you're going to end up working with. Content class is another big one. We'll talk about that in a second. That tells you what that item is all about, for the most part. However, these properties, one of the weirdest things to get used to is you're not referring to these properties simply by this property name. Because everything is organized into namespaces, instead, you refer to them like this. You preface them with that wonderful, short, usable namespace name. They aren't the prettiest of things. How do you use them? Here's an idea. You can get at those properties with pretty much anything. ADO, CDO, using the fields collection. Put in that entire name. For example, here we have dav href going through an ADO fields collection. So for example, I could open up an item, say that contact item, grab the href property, dav:/href, and I'll have the URL to that item. CDO gives you a couple different options for getting at those properties. I love using CDO libraries even if I'm not writing CDO code because of these reasons. Number one, you get these constants. Instead of having to type out that entire namespace and property name, you can use that constant instead. Also, if you are going to be writing CDO code, a lot of times CDO objects actually have properties that expose those different schema properties. For example, subject here for a message. The subject CDO property actually sets a schema property with the name of, I think it's HTTP mail :subject, something on that order. Actually, it's much longer. And you can also get at those things with XML. Cool thing about custom properties can be iterated along with all those predefined properties that we just saw. So you can go ahead and create any custom properties you want, and you'll be able to return those together with your other ones. For those of you who are writing a lot of Outlook applications against 5.5, you knew that this was a pain in the butt to try and get at these properties. And finally, properties, custom properties, all of them you can index. Ooh, that's a big one. So how do those properties get assigned? They're assigned with what are called content classes. I'm going to blow through this really fast so we can get to the good stuff. Content classes simply identify the intent or purpose of an item. For example, earn::content classes: person indicates a contact type of item. It's simply a lengthy name. But it simply identifies the intent of that item. It doesn't restrict you in any sort of way to what you can do with it. Every resource you have has one of these things, these content classes. You can either assign them or you can allow Exchange to assign them. It's similar to the Outlook message property, where you would set the message property to IPM.something. Except the difference here is that content class just associates properties with a resource. It doesn't restrict it, and it also doesn't associate any kind of form right now. Okay, so before we get into web storage forms, however, I want to give you a feel for something called a custom schema. Okay? You can expand upon this schema with your own schema. You can create your own properties. You can create your own content classes. And as we're going to see in web forms, you can define form definitions inside of these schema folders in order to associate your custom web pages with certain items. Okay. So actually, what I need to do so that you really understand this and so that you actually wake up, because I know we haven't shown all the fun stuff yet, I need some volunteers. And we're going to demonstrate. I see this one woman just sink down in their chair. No, not me. We're going to demonstrate how a schema works. And I know this seems really just kind of, oh, God, it's boring as all hell. Yes, I know. But the thing is that if you have a firm grasp on your schema, you're going to be able to build any application you want. If you don't have a firm grasp of the schema, properties, content classes, and namespaces, you're going to end up rewriting the same application over and over and over again and wasting a lot of time. So on that note, let's say that we're building an application. For example, before I get the volunteers up here, I'm going to close this up. I'm going to show you a sample here. This is something called ZooWeb. And this is an application running off of Exchange public folders. It's very simple, once again, because I want to drive home the points to you. And for example, I've got an animals folder. This is a public folder out there that contains different animal registrations in the zoo. For example, we've got Booze Hound here. And when I click on that, I get my properties. I'm looking at the details for my animal here, but what's really cool about this is everything you're seeing on there are custom properties. None of those are standard properties, but I'm still using Exchange folders. These custom properties I've actually defined inside of a schema folder, a custom application schema folder. I've also defined what's called an animal content class that's specific to my application. This as well is inside the schema folder. And as we're going to see in a minute here, the way in which you get these web pages to display instead of Outlook Web Access is by using a schema folder. So, on that note, now I need volunteers. I need 3 brave souls to come up here and just help me with a quick demonstration. It's not painful. It won't take a lot. So who's it going to be? No. I've got 1 brave soul. I've got 2 brave souls. I need 1 more brave soul. Come on, I'll buy you a beer later. Okay. Okay, I think we've got 3 brave souls up here. You, good sir, are going to be your base schema, our base schema. Okay. You're going to stand off to the side and be our custom application schema, and you're going to be a folder. So we don't need you yet. No, okay. We don't know anything about you yet. There you go, turn to the wall. Hold up your sign, there we go, up high. Okay, and just stand there until your arms get tired. Okay. Hold up your, all right, so what we've got here is Exchange. Never thought you'd see it like this, huh? So at the top of every web storage system is something called a base schema. And your base schema contains all those godforsaken ugly properties that I just showed you, things like href, etc. Okay. So for example, I'm caught. Oh, let's go with this. There's a property called author. You think you can hold 2 things at once? Okay, excellent. So inside of our base schema, we've got this custom property called book. Okay, we'll just say it's, actually, we'll use one that's real, author. Okay. Author is inside the base schema. Now, when I go into my application and I create a folder, by default, that folder is already looking up at base schema. Go ahead, look at him. There you go. All right. So this folder can access all the properties inside the base schema, including author. Okay. But we want to do more than this. We want to build a custom application and add custom properties. So what we need to do is add a custom application schema. So come on over here. We're going to actually put you right in between. You can move down a little bit. Thank you. Hold up high. Excellent. So you are the custom application schema. Now, when you create a custom application schema, you're actually just creating a folder. New folder, and you're hiding it. That's all there is to it. However, you need to do 2 things, actually. The custom application schema folder is already going to be looking at base schema, as you can see. Okay. As soon as we created him, just like him, he's looking up here. However, we've got our folder over here who's not looking at our custom applications folder. Excellent. He's looking up at the base schema. I love this. But we're going to go on. We've got our custom application schema. Now I need you to do one hand, one hand. Okay. And we've created a custom property in there called phone. Okay. We just have this thing. We need to know exactly what style of phone or what ringer they have, whatever. It's a custom property that exists inside of here. The dilemma comes in, how do you get your folder to get your custom properties as well as all of your standard properties? And that's actually done by setting one property called schema collection reference. Okay. And by setting that property, you tell your folders to look at your custom application schema folder instead of up here. So make sure you're looking at him. Don't look past him. Okay. looking at him, so now this folder is going to have access to this custom property. And because, there you go, excellent. We'll discuss payment later. So now he's got access to the custom properties, and because our custom schema is looking up at our base schema, our folder also has access to our built-in properties. Got any more hands? There you go. So now he can get to all of them. So this setting, this configuration is absolutely necessary if you're going to be using custom properties, custom content classes, and web forms. Okay? So let's give a round of applause for our helpers here. Thank you, guys. And actually, I'm going to need you guys again in 1 second, okay? So stick around. And actually, why don't you keep, no, I'll give them back. All right, so now that you have an idea for that, let me just show you quick. I built a little helper tool. Not that. That wasn't it. Let's close that down. Little helper tool. And once again, all this code is going to be available on the PostCon CD. It's also up on my website, and it'll be available in the book if you happen by chance, please, 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 to buy the book. Okay? But I went through a lot this year, and what I've tried to do is give you guys a lot of tools to make your life a lot easier when it comes to developing this stuff. To give you an idea of how that SCR stuff works, first thing I'm going to do is actually show you what a schema folder looks like. And here we are in that custom application, Zoo Management, and Zoo Management has a schema folder inside of there. It's hidden by default, but you can access it using a URL, so you will have to remember to use security to lock out other people from this. But this is an example of what goes into a schema folder. I'm an administrator, so I can get into anything. That's why. I've got things like animal. That's a content class. Special needs. These are all these different properties that we're seeing. And notice you have your standard view here as well. Let me minimize that. Using your schema collection reference, what you can do is tell folders where to look for more information. So for example, that schema folder we just saw, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you how to do this in more detail here, I'm changing the content class of my folder. You can change it on the fly. It's simply an identifier. I'm going to change it, and I'm setting its schema collection reference to point to this tool I have. That's going to give me a much nicer view than this. I'm going to go ahead and save my changes. I just changed some properties. And when I go ahead and refresh this, sure enough, suddenly I've got this great web page up. This is actually viewing specifically what are called form registrations, which is what we're about to see. So that schema collection reference property is easy to change. It's easy to point your folders in all different locations. All right, so that's a wonderful lead-in to web storage system forms. Andrew showed you a number of different examples, how you can pretty much create these wonderful front ends to exchange folders, and it doesn't have to have any of the typical Outlook Web Access presentation to it. It's up to you. You can reuse Outlook as well, and I'll show you how. But you can also create your own forms. Now, web storage system forms. If you're anything like me as a developer, the first thing you think of when you hear something forms is, oh God, another forms package from Microsoft. I have to learn something new. No, no. Beautiful thing, it's not another forms package. Basically, it's a catchphrase for any web page that is registered inside of that forms registry that Andrew was talking about. Okay. By registering your different web pages with this form registry tool, you can replace those standard Outlook Web Access views. In fact, you just saw that working with my schema folder. I was using standard Outlook Web Access. By changing a couple things, and I already had a folder or a form registration, suddenly I get this great view up. Now, web storage system forms. A couple things you need to know. Basically, I'm missing one thing from here. In order to use web storage system forms, you need two things, okay? Or actually three, I guess. You need your web pages, and then you need your things like form registration items, and under the covers, you're going to be using your forms registry. Your web pages, you are going to have inside of Exchange. You're going to store them right inside of your Exchange folders. The reason you need to do this is so that when you're accessing your data inside of there, what's going to happen is Exchange is going to be looking for two things. Normally, it won't find these things, which we'll talk about. So what happens is you get OA. Okay? You say, oh, I want to go out to, for example, give you a feel for this. I have another folder in here called Staff. When I access this public folder, I get Outlook Web Access back. But what if I want a custom web page view instead? Okay. In order to get that custom web page to actually display, I'm going to put that web page inside of an Exchange folder and create a form registration item that the forms registry is going to parse through for me. Okay. I don't have to do anything special to install the forms registry. What I do need, however, is a schema. So guess what? To really drill this home, I need my volunteers again plus one. I need one more person to participate in this. I'm going to be buying a lot of beer, aren't I? All right, we need our base schema back. Okay. And we got our folder. You're so good at a folder. And you're going to actually have two. Okay, don't show this one yet. And you're going to be our web form. Okay, so web form down. We don't need you yet. Yeah, there you go. Okay, we've got our folder. Yeah, we can have our application schema, and we've got our base schema up. So what happens is, let's pretend this is our staff folder you just saw. One of the big key concepts here that I'm going to drill home, and you must remember, web access inside of Exchange 2000 is data focused. It is not web page focused. So when you're accessing things with URLs inside the web browser, you are typing in the URL to the data. That never changes when you start using custom stuff as well. Okay? So let's start with what happens naturally. We've got our staff folder here, for example. And when a user takes a browser and accesses that folder, what Exchange is going to do is go through our beautiful schema setup here and look for something called a form registration item, which is an item with a special content class and some information. It's going to look through. If it doesn't find this thing, it's going to get all the way up to the base schema, and it's going to bring us back Outlook Web Access to display that data. Okay. However, if you don't want Outlook Web Access to display that data, you want the custom form, what we're going to do is employ the forms registry. No, I haven't been drinking any beer. And I think are we at slides? No? How about now? Okay, excellent. So hold on there, guys, for 1 second. So our forms registry, in order to use this thing, you've got two things, these form registration items and a forms registry. Now, the forms registry technology comes with Exchange 2000. What you need to do as a developer is to establish a forms registry inside of a schema folder. Now, in my example here, I've decided to just use the custom schema folder I've already got. So I'm turning him into my forms registry. Okay. What I'm going to do with this forms registry is I'm going to put these registration things inside of here. We need a registration thing. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay. I'm a registration. Okay. This is a form registration. So what's going to happen now is, actually, we need you over there. after I create my forms registry folder, it's inside of my schema path here, and I've got my form registration item. This time when the user clicks on the folder, Exchange is going to look through our schema. It's going to find this form registration item. And this form registration item has two main things in it that we care about, which is, one, the content class of that folder. So exactly what was accessed. And it also has one other thing, the name of the web form that we want to use instead of Outlook Web Access. So Exchange is going to look inside of this, see that content class, find that web form, and this time, rather than bringing back OA, go ahead and just run down here. We're going to have our web form comes all the way back and displays the contents of that folder. So this is essentially how it's all working. Content class, web page. The web page and the form registration thing both have to be somewhere inside of here in order to get it to work. All right. Thanks, guys. Once again, big round of applause for our volunteers. Thank you. So let's actually show this stuff. So here's our staff folder we talked about. How do we get this thing to actually display a web page? Well, the first thing you need to do is actually have a web page. Thank you. How's that? Got it? Excellent. So what you just missed was simply this. We've got a standard view. So now in order to get those web storage system views on here, to get a pretty page, what we need to do, it's not that, is create our web page, which is already inside of here, something I created earlier. And this is just a simple ASP. That's all this thing is. It could also be an XML-based file. It's up to you. It can be a couple of other things, whatever you want. I chose ASP. So this ASP just has some information in here that's actually going out and querying the web store. And I believe Brent Ingram is going to be talking later this week on ADO, and we'll drill into the details of what you're seeing here, or kind of seeing, because I know it's small. Okay? But basically, this is just going out querying. It's your typical ASP. ADO code, grab the data, bring it back, display it. That's all there is to it. This is the schema folder we just saw a few minutes ago. So it's inside of here. So now that I have my web page here, what I need to do is not show this. What I need to do is now create a form registration item. So I'm going to go back to this. Normally, what you have to do in order to create form registrations is to write code. You create this item inside of a schema folder, okay? Set a bunch of properties, specify a certain content class. It's ugly. Okay? To make life easier, I've got this ASP-based version that just allows you to fill in some information. And what you're seeing here are all form registration items that allow me to display different types of data, content classes, the associated web page, and I use specific scenarios, different criteria to bring that information back. Very simple. Let's create a new registration for that staff folder. Now, because everything is data-driven, you're going to indicate what the content class of that item that is triggering the web page. So in our case, I used a custom content class that I just changed on my own to this staff folder content class thing. Doesn't really mean much of anything except to me and my application. A command, if you want to pass any command parameters, how exactly you're requesting the data, whether it's a get or a post. Are you pulling the data back to display it to a client? It's a get. Are you saving stuff back to an Exchange folder? It's a post. The execute URL, which happens to be the ASP. This could be XW Forms DLL, another tool with Exchange 2000. However, ASP can render itself. So we're going to use that. Form URL, all this stuff, I believe, is going to be drilled into detail with Jamie Cool's session on web storage system forms, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But let's go ahead and just grab a couple more things. I'm going to go ahead and save this out. I've got my new registration here, staff folder. So what should happen is whenever I access an item that has this content class with just any command parameter, and I'm doing a get, I should get this ASP page back. So let's actually try this out. If I come out to ZooWeb and let's go back to our staff folder, yep, sure enough, instead of getting that default Outlook web access view back, I get that custom page back. And this would work whenever I use a URL to this, whether it's inside code, and I'm bringing back something with this content class, a URL as a hyperlink on a web page, typed directly inside of here with frames, anything. And that's exactly what's happening here in this sample. Animals, this is the contents of an animals folder. Creating a new animal item. Let's try entering something. Super roost. Super rooster. Submit. You're able to use all of your standard web development experience directly against Exchange now. It doesn't take much more aside from creating these form registration items. That's it. Let's try this a little slower so it actually works. Excellent. What time did I start at? 5? Oh, so we're doing good on time. Excellent. Web storage system events. How do you build these things? Let's talk. Quick review for those of you who weren't here. Web storage system events, a new event model to Exchange 2000, really expands upon what you could do with Exchange 5.5. In fact, you were pretty limited with Exchange 5.5 events. You could basically react to something being done after the fact. So after you saved something, after you moved something, after you deleted it, you could do something then. With web storage system events, not only can you react to something after it occurs, but you can use these new synchronous events to react to it before it completes. So for example, you can catch an item before it is fully deleted and prevent it from being deleted. Or intercept an item, a brand new item that's being created, and stop it from being created, or change some properties, etc. Asynchronous events triggered after the action has occurred versus synchronous are triggered before it is committed. One key thing to note here is when you are building these things, remember that the asynchronous events, the store continues to work. The information store Exchange just goes. It does its thing. When you're working with synchronous, however, the store halts. Okay? It pauses. Okay? Be aware of that. Don't write a bunch of different synchronous event syncs if all you're doing is sending out notification mail. Okay? You shouldn't have to stop the store for something like that. Available store events, quick review. For synchronous events, you have 2, on-sync save, on-sync delete. You only have 2 because save and delete catch things like changes, moves, copies, etc. as well. Okay. Asynchronous events, you have that on-save, on-delete, as well as 3 system events. On MDB startup, on MDB shutdown, on timer. These actually apply to this system. I like the concept of on MDB startup and shutdown because this way you can write code that traps when a specific web storage system goes down and alert the owning developer. Send off notification mail, hey, your application has gone down. That way the developer knows right off the bat that something's wrong. So how do you create these things? I'm going to show you a very simple example. There are a number of different steps. To create an event sync, we're going to see how to use VB to build an active DLL. And you reference the XOLADB library, register this thing, create a COM wrapper, identify a security context, and create an event registration. Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean a lot until you see it. So let's do it. Let's minimize some of this stuff. Okay, we're going to come into a Visual Basic project here. This is an existing one. I'm going to come back to this in 1 second. Let's actually see what it looks like from the get-go. So if you were to create a brand new event sync, you would come into Visual Basic, for example, create a new active DLL. You've got your class modules, and the first thing you need to do is set your references. The most important reference is going to be XOLADB. XOLADB is the provider, the OLADB provider. God, I hate saying that 10 times fast. Is the provider for Exchange, runs on the server, and also contains all your information for your events, your event methods. So we're going to reference this, as well as you want to reference any object library for the code you will write. So for example, if you wanted to use CDO to write some mail notification stuff, you would go ahead in here and reference CDO, for example. Okay. Now, once you have your references sent, you're going to do implements calls inside of here. Okay. I'm not going to go ahead and type this all out. Instead of typing it, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay. Inside of a class module, type implements, indicate the XOLADB provider, as well as the type of events you want to use. In this class module, I'm using async events. And I've got 2 different event methods down here. Now, you don't have to type this stuff in yourself. You can actually, after you implement, reference the event methods using the object and property drop-downs and select the different methods. Here, for example, is some code inside of the onSave event, async event. We've got some very simple CDO code that you're seeing here, which is simply creating a brand new mail message, setting some properties from to, and it's going to end up sending this thing off to me whenever I save something. Of course, I haven't defined where I'm going to save something yet. So once I get done writing all this code, now something you need to be aware of is when you are creating these things, you will need to create the procedure stubs for all of the event methods for that type. So for example, here, even though I'm not using code for the onDelete event, I have to have that stub here. No need to put code there, however. Once you finish writing your code inside of here, next thing you want to do is make that DLL. Let's go ahead and make it. You want to store this on the server, on the Exchange server. Go ahead and creating that. Once you've created the DLL, you still have to register it. And you can register it using your simple regserver32. So I'm just going to run my regserv. This is my DLL. When I run this, now that DLL is registered on my Exchange server. However, your event syncs cannot run in process. They must run out of process from the store. So what we want to do then is create a COM wrapper for these things in order to execute these out of process. Come back inside of here. I'm going to go into my component services. And let's see if we have something here already. Yeah, let's blow it away. Let's live dangerously. So I'm going to register for my, oh, stop. Just stop. Yeah, it doesn't want to stop. I'm going to come inside component services. I'm going to create my new COM application. Now, I'm not creating my components inside of an existing app. I'm going to build a whole new wrapper for this. So I'm going to create a new COM application. We're We're going to create an empty one. It is a server app. This is running on the Exchange server. Call this Zoo Management. Okay. Next. Now, in order for your code to execute, you have to specify who has the specific rights to run this stuff. So I'm going to use a specific user I have who has very defined rights. Select him from here. Otherwise, it would be the currently logged on person. And I'm finish up. So what I've got here is just an empty application. I need to actually fill it with stuff. I'm going to come into that application, and I'm going to add some components to it. Next, install new components. I happen to already be on that DLL. I'm just going to select the registered DLL, open it up, and it finds all of those class modules for me, brings them in. And when I finish up, there are my different components. And if I drill into here, there we go, I can go all the way down to specific methods and see each of those different event methods that are currently being employed, even if they don't have code in them. And as we're going to see in a couple minutes here, this is really kind of cool because you can use COM+ roles to add security to these different features and restrict or allow specific users access or the ability to actually execute the code there. So I've got my event sync registered, and this thing is called an event sync. It's there, it's good to go, but when is it going to get triggered? The event sync is triggered by what's called an event registration item. Yes, another registration item. Okay. An event registration item is very similar to the other registration things. It has specific properties. It has a specific content class. I'm going to use another tool I built for creating these. Event registration tool. And I think I already have one of these things created. Yep. I have an event registration already created for the onSave event. And you want to indicate what the sync class is. Basically, you're indicating the COM component that you're registering for. And the coolest thing here are twofold. First of all, in 5.5, when you were registering for events, if you wanted that event to occur, that event agent, to actually trigger for more than one folder, what did you have to do? You had to create that thing on every folder. What a pain, especially if you had to put that thing on about 50 folders. What's really nice about these event registration items is you don't have to do that anymore. You can use one particular property called match scope. And you can define how deep you want to go, what type of items, what type of folders will trigger this event. So essentially, you can create an event registration on a parent folder and use this example of deep traversal. So any subfolder and any item inside of those folders can all trigger that single event. You don't have to create it on every single folder that you want to use. Okay? And you can get pretty specific on these. Once again, there's a drill down session on it. The other one I like is something called criteria. Using your event registration items, you can specify criteria so that only particular items with very specific properties will trigger that code and cause it to run. Now, the alternative to this was writing code inside of your event agent in 5.5 or event sync in 2000 that would actually loop through the information or use if. If this property equals this, then do this code. But think about it if you're using synchronous events. What if you were to stop the store every single time this event was triggered and do that analysis right inside of that event? And maybe only 20% of the time you actually wanted that code to occur. That's a waste of a lot of resources on the server. Instead, create event registration items that define the criteria up front. so that, for example, only specific items with a property value of, you know, let's say specialty field equal to amphibians. If you create a new item with that property, then trigger that event. Otherwise, I'm not interested. One of the base criteria that I like to use is this one here, where is hidden equals false. This thing is nice because a lot of times you end up creating hidden items. Form registration items are hidden. Event registration items are hidden. All these different things, synchronization things, hidden. Rather than having your event triggered for those, you can use something like this and say, no, I'm not interested in those once again. And you can create as many of these registrations as you want. I'm going to go ahead and close that up. So we should now have an event registered on our animals folder. And if I were to create a new animal here, new animal, it's very original, and I submit it, what should happen is if I go into the inbox, my inbox on this server, yep, I should have a new item here, and actually I had one that was created from before. And it lets me know, yes, this new item has been created. And to give you an idea of how ugly some of these URLs can get, I've included one here. This is actually a URL to an item. Okay. So yes, the event did work. It was triggered. I could go ahead and create these on as many folders as I need. I can create them for the system. And I can really make my applications come alive. I can make my folders do some of the work for me. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is a little bit about security and give you a taste of what Andrew is going to be showing you later in the week. As you've probably already heard, security inside of Exchange has really just exploded and expanded. Lots of options to us as developers. Exchange 2000 is very tightly integrated with the Windows 2000 security model. And as developers, you can now access that information and control it, the ACLs, the access control lists, as well as defining who belongs to those control lists, the ACEs. You can use security programmatically all the way down to the item level. This is so cool. Before, we only had folders. You could define on your folders who can get into the folders, who can create things, who can delete them, etc. You can still do all that. However, you can even define it right on the item itself, so that only particular people can access specific items. Programmatically, you can also do it on folders. See an example of where you're going to be looking for this information. Your security information for an Exchange item, a folder or an item, is stored in a schema property called security descriptor. And your security descriptor brings back, very interestingly enough, XML. For example, let's, we'll leave it. Here's a URL to the applications folder. Click the button. What's happening is here is we're just accessing a property. The property is security descriptor. It's going out and it's getting the information which is coming back as all XML. The security descriptor contains the different access control lists as well as the different ACEs inside of those lists, letting me know who has permissions to do what and who is denied rights to do what. In order to actually use this information, you're going to have to parse through it, generally using the XML DOM. To give you a quick little taste of this, here's an example of a procedure that looks inside of a particular URL. So for example, that URL to the applications folder, it returns the information, the security descriptor information, and it places that information inside of an XML document object, a DOM document object. Once inside of here, you're seeing all XML DOM in order to parse through this using different node lists and nodes to pull out, for example, in this case, what's called an access mask, which indicates the permissions. It's a hex that indicates exactly what permissions that person has, as well as the NT4 compatible name, the unique name for each user. You can also build these things programmatically. You can go ahead and build your own XML documents, add on to the existing one, and then set that security programmatically. I believe Andrew is going to be showing you some great stuff later in the week on how to do this. Now, one other thing I want to talk about, in security, is security in your code. Yes, you can use 80.2.5 to access Exchange. However, it does use the XOLADB provider to do so. And the XOLADB provider does not support impersonation. So for example, the open method of the record object has by default two parameters called username and password. You cannot use these with the XOLADB provider. You can, they're just not going to do anything for you. Okay. One way to do impersonation or to restrict people from doing certain things with your code is to actually employ COM+ roles. COM+ roles allow you to specify who can execute particular portions of code. It's much easier for me to just simply show you. To make this point, I'm going to come out and show you one other demo, something called patient care. It's like a hospital demo. We've got this one area called patients. And patients just accesses an Exchange folder and pulls out patient information. Anybody can get to this information. Anybody can execute this code. So in order to make the code more secure, what I've done here is pulled that code out of the application, out of the ASP pages, put it inside of DLLs, active DLLs, and then registered those things with COM services just like what you saw with the event sync. Once you do that, you can then go ahead and use COM+ roles. For example, here are the different components that contain the code that allow that web application to run. Okay. In order to restrict who can execute this, the first thing I need to do is specify the security settings for the out-of-process applications, the entire application. And what I want to do is I'm going to enforce access checks. Rather than just simply saying, well, the process is running, you look good, I'm going to let you run all the code because it's all running under the same user. Instead, I'm going to say, you know what? Look at everything. Verify that that user can run everything, all the different things. If they don't have permissions to do it, I don't want them to do it. Say OK. It says, yeah, this is going to apply to everything. That's all right. And let's see, the next thing we need to do is actually come in here and create a brand new role. Now, a COM role is simply a container. It associates different users and security groups from the Active Directory. I'm going to create one called doctors. And actually, we'll leave that empty. And now, for example, my patient code, everybody shouldn't be able to run this code. Doctors definitely should, but not everybody. So I'm going to come inside of here into this component and look at its security properties. And we've got something a little different. Here we've got, yes, enforce our security checks. And then we see a list of roles. And by checking one of these, you're saying that only people that belong to this role can execute this code. I'm going to say OK. At this point, our role of doctors doesn't have any members. So if I go inside of here, I'm going to go back home and I'm going to try and access my patients again. There, the security is in place. I can't get in because I am not a member of that doctor role. Now, if we come back in here and add a new user, let's add myself. I'm now a member of this role. And come back, go home, click on patients. Now I can get in because it was checking to make sure that I was a member of that COM role. I have rights to access this. Now you can take this even further and write code in your application that checks. I believe it's like is role member. There are certain methods that you can use to verify so that you don't get that ugly screen up that you saw with me, the 404. Okay? So you're not stuck with that. So, finally, yes, we are down to the summary. A few key concepts I want you to walk away with. These are great terms. If you understand these, you are well on your way to building a great application, web storage system, etc. Code samples, they will be available on the post-con CD. There's my website. You can get them there as well as in the book. Some other sessions that cover in detail things that I only touched the tip of the iceberg on. CDO is tomorrow. Workflow Wednesday. I didn't even talk about that. ADO Thursday. Events Thursday. Security Thursday. Thursday's a little busy. And that's it. So thank you very much for sticking around. I appreciate it. Oh, if you're interested in playing around with Exchange 2000, we have a great lab set up. We've got a gentleman in the back who's got registration cards. You just fill these out, take them down to one desk, and you get access to the rest of the lab. Any questions, I guess I'll take up here. Thank you.